你这段时间学习中文的时候，会不会有一种停滞不前的感觉？就是说，不管自己有多努力，都没有办法提高口语，还是说的一点都不自然、不流利，甚至有的时候像机器人一样。Here's why. Because everything you've been taught has trained you to decode Mandarin, to get really good at receiving it and understanding it, but not to produce it. And those are two completely different skills.But the good news is, the fix is actually really simple. To stop thinking about Mandarin as words and grammar that you have to kind of smush together, and to instead think of Mandarin as being composed of chunks and patterns. Well, that's all well and good. We all want to be able to speak Mandarin naturally and confidently on demand. But what on earth is a chunk?A chunk is like a fixed unit of expressing an idea in Mandarin. You know, like a short phrase or, a sentence pattern, this kind of thing. And the key idea is this, that you store and retrieve it as a whole. So you don't have to build the sentence that you're going to say from individual words. Instead, you build it from these prefabricated larger chunks. So you can kind of think about it a bit like music. If you were just learning a song, you would kind of have to think very carefully about the individual notes of each part. But when you go and sing a song that you know well, you don't really have to think about anything at all. It just flows out naturally. You don't have to be thinking about the rhythm, the melody, the different notes involved. And that's exactly the kind of thing that chunking can do for your speaking. So instead of your brain frantically trying to search for these different words and then gluing them together with grammar rules, imposing your native language grammar on top of that as well, which is, slow. Instead, you're just retrieving whole units of language that are just ready to go out of the box. So here's what it looks like in practice. So sentence starters like 严格来说，对我来说，我觉得这事儿吧, and so on.They're not just, things you have to memorize. They're like launching pads for every single sentence that comes out of your mouth. So as soon as you say one of these, the rest of the sentence just follows that bit easier. Sometimes it just takes that getting started. And a lot of the time, sentence starters can be really helpful with doing that. Or we've got sentence patterns like 陷入之中，投入到中，如果，就，虽然，但是 and so on. Now, when you learn these patterns well, you just slot things in and out of them to make thousands of different sentences by just knowing one base pattern. That's a lot easier than having to consciously come up with something new every single time you're trying to say something. So here's the difference between the traditional grammar vocab approach and the chunking approach side by side. The traditional approach, you learn words out of context, isolated. You then learn the grammar rules. You then try and construct a sentence and it becomes, quite slow. And the level of multitasking involved here is probably a bit like me trying to do a headstand while filming this video. Whereas the chunking approach involves starting from input, absorbing natural speech patterns, learning them, reinforcing them, internalizing them, learning to use them flexibly and interchangeably. So every time you go and make a sentence, you're not just building it from scratch from individual words. So one of these sounds very much like a native speaker. The other sounds a bit like a really dedicated student kind of reading from a textbook. The good news is this, switching from one to the other doesn't involve kind of scrapping everything that you've already done in your Mandarin learning and starting from scratch all over again. That's not how it works. It's simply just swapping the focus of your learning. It requires, paying attention to different things while you're learning. Let's break this down a bit more. So at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, this sounds pretty good. Like, I'd like to give this whole chunking thing a go. But where am I going to go and find chunks? Like, how does this all work? There's two places that I want to point out here. The first is input. Think TV shows, podcasts, YouTube videos, books, novels, anything that can keep you engaged, is interesting, and it's at the right level for you, such that you're not feeling overwhelmed, but at the same time there's plenty of new stuff to learn. These are like the gold mines for chunking. So they're full of natural speech patterns, they're full of natural sayings that Chinese people use on a daily basis. You've just got to hunt them down and learn them. So you've got to have this idea that you're building your own personal collection of these things. So you're going to go to the whatever it is you're using, the TV show, and you're going to make notes of things that you notice. So for example, you might notice the pattern 你觉得 something,怎么样. Now here's the second place I want you to go, and this one's slightly better in some ways because it gives you like your brain an itch that you need to satisfy, and that is having real conversations with people. Now real conversations give you real life context, and if you can't recall something in a conversation, I don't know about you, when I was learning Mandarin I had a lot of this, that if I would forget how to say something, it would make me like go, oh, I really want to know how to say that, and then the next time I go and study it I remember it so much easier because I've encountered a situation where I really needed it and I have that real life context to back it up. So conversations are amazing memory hooks, and also a great source of new chunks and patterns that you can just steal from your native speaker friends. I think this is the thing, too often we feel that we have to learn Mandarin. I think what we can do is just copy and steal Mandarin. That's absolutely fine, that's probably what we should be doing. Now if you want to try any of this today, you can just give it a go by starting off with sentence starters and sentence patterns that I've put together that I think are really, really common, and you can go away and learn them with some examples. I'm sure that'll be a great way for you to get started. It also comes with like a free 7-day email course that will kind of walk you through the whole process step by step. Links in the description if you're interested. So you found your chunks. Now how do you actually go about getting them into your head in such a way that you can retrieve them as whole units when you actually need them in real life conversations? So I think there are two methods that work together exceptionally well. Let's break them down. The first is English to Chinese flashcards. Now I know what you're thinking, core flashcards, like you've probably already done them before, right? But here's the thing, most people do Mandarin to English flashcards. And guess what? That's training what we talked about earlier. That's training how to decode Mandarin and, understand Mandarin. It's not training you to produce it. So we're going to do these English to Chinese flashcards so that we're actually training you to produce Mandarin under pressure. Now it's harder, it's uncomfortable, but it works. For each chunk you come across, try and add like 2 or maybe 3 flashcards with sentences with different context, and ideally the rest of the flashcard apart from that chunk all needs to be stuff that you're already very confident on, so you're only testing yourself on one new thing each time, and then you're just going to say the whole sentence out loud when you flip over the flashcard. The second method is closed deletion, which I talk about on this channel an awful lot, and that is you intentionally blank out the thing that you're trying to learn. So for example, if you were learning the pattern 虽然但是, you could have a whole sentence where you know everything else except the 虽然但是, and then you can just have a close, so a blank for 虽然 and a different blank for 但是, and then each time you're just testing yourself to recall that part of the chunk so that you get used to how it's used. So try and use these methods consistently as you can. If you use Anki, try and do at least 15-20 minutes a day, and over time you'll notice that you feel something shift. That chunk no longer feels like something you're learning, but something that you've internalized and can start to use naturally in conversations, and that's exactly where you want to be. So if you've made it this far, you know exactly why lots of Mandarin learners get stuck at just understanding Mandarin and never being able to produce it, and you now know exactly what to do about that. So the chunks in the description is a great way to just get started with this from today and make that commitment to start chunking and learning Mandarin in chunks. And once you've done that, definitely get out there and start collecting your own chunks from real life content. But here's the thing, chunking is only one piece of the puzzle. From having worked with Mandarin learners all over the world, I've noticed time and time again there are actually 3 pillars that set apart Mandarin learners who are very, very successful and do a great job of learning the language, and some who are less so. And because they're not doing these 3 pillars, they get stuck and they stay there for an awful long time. So in this next video here, I'll break down all 3 of these really vital pillars and show you exactly how to fit them into your Mandarin learning system so that you can be one of those who really goes on to succeed in your Mandarin learning.